Okay, bearing in mind we're giving steers today. We've got another chance to debate these recommendations further down the track as part of the LTP adoption. So we've got C on the table in front of us. It's been moved and seconded, applying an average rate increase of 6% per year. That's been moved and seconded. I'll just put that to the vote now. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. So we move on to D, which is...
There's one against.
One against? Does anybody want to call a division? Yep, that's what we just voted for. Do you want to call a division? So, in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. The Mayor, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Cofford, Councillor Spires. And against, please raise your hands. Councillor Warwick and Councillor Handford. Did we get Councillor Wilson for? We got it all. We've got all our ticks.
There's Wilson.
Yep.
Blood. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so now we move to D, which is maintains our preference to transfer the older person's housing to a new community housing provider. Does anybody have any questions about that one? The submission feedback was pretty clear cut. Councillor Warwick?
With regard to the conversation about just handing it over or having some price tag to it, even if it's not the full price tag, are we able to elaborate
Is
or
that
discuss
able to be discussed at a later date? Chris?
Just waiting. Oh, kia ora. Kia ora. In relation to that question, I know it says transfer. That isn't a signal that it is a free transfer. We will be bringing the next steps back to you. You will need to make a decision as to how you want that transfer to happen. And so it may be that you determine you want us to look at market value and to effectively, I think Councillor Cooper mentioned the idea of the entity being able to debt fund. So at the moment we're exploring options for that entity around how we might do some of that. So this decision is not about the how, it's just about the fact that it won't be with council, just as a clarification point.
Great. Do I have a mover for D? Moved by Councillor Warwick, seconded by Councillor Kirby. Right of introduction, Councillor Warwick. Waived. Any debate on this? We've had quite a lot of conversation about it. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. Now we move to another one where I think we've got differing views around the table, which is whether or not so the recommendation is not to introduce a new climate action rate, noting its preference was previously to introduce a new climate action rate. Do I have somebody who's willing to move that motion? Councillor Cooper's moving that. Councillor Warwick seconding. So the proposal on the table is not to introduce a new climate action rate. Right of introduction. Councillor Cooper.
No, wait.
What?
Don't have to.
No.
Yep, well, go to the vote.
Yeah, no, I think I'd quite like to explain my thinking around how I'm intending to vote on this. So this was one where we had a really clear steer from our community, and I'm going to be consistent with the way I indicated my preference around the 17% rates increase. I think this is a great initiative, and I'd really love to do it. And I think it would have, and it would really communicate our dedication to climate change. But I don't think we've communicated it well enough. I don't think we've landed it well enough. And I think that the community, for better or worse, has misunderstood what it's about. We're unclear about what would go into it. We're unclear about the scope of it. It's got all tangled up with our climate adaptation work. There's a view out there that for some reason that it's helping to pay for the Takutai Kapiti work, for instance. And I just think we haven't managed to land this one. It doesn't mean that we would slow down our work in the climate space. And I would be asking for our annual, if this passes, I'll be asking for our annual report and our half-yearly report to have a separate section on climate change so that we have full transparency over activities in that area, and also that all our financial reporting identifies what we're spending in the climate space so we can keep tabs on it. And that, if we did that for a while, we'd be much better prepared for introducing a climate rate in the future. Because I still hope this can happen at some point. I just don't think we've managed to get it across the line with the community this time. Councillor Warwick?
I'd love to support yourself, but I can't. And I think it's the same kind of thing. It's the appetite for people to, and they think we're increasing the rates to have this rate. But I think there's the opportunity with the think tank and the work that's going on around it to actually build a picture for the future of what this could be and what it could go towards, because right now I don't have any idea what actually specific projects it would go towards, so I don't know that we should set a rate without a plan, targeted rate.
Councillor Wilson?
Yes, having heard from Evie Dewhurst and Ashley Wilson-Goldman from Low Carbon Kapiti, the primary reason is about keeping this an open communication going and making this as transparent as possible. We often, lots of people sort of stood up and said, we want a transparent council. I think this is transparency. And it might not be popular with a lot of people, but I think in 1893, the vast majority of people thought women shouldn't get the vote, but Lord Glasgow signed it off anyway, and that worked out okay, generally speaking. Thinking of Ruth Richardson. Yeah, so sometimes, you're not going to go with a public view, but you're right. I think there was a degree of confusion about what this meant. But I think we know what it means, and let's be transparent about it. I can't see a downside other than being unpopular with some people.
Councillor Hanford?
Yeah, cool. So just reminding the table that we have set an aspirational district-wide emissions reduction target of 2040. We've also declared a climate emergency. We have committed to reducing our corporate emissions to net zero by 2040 as well. And I think that this rate specifically will show, in terms of that transparency and communications piece, show every member of our community how they are contributing to that district-wide emissions reduction mahi, which we don't have until the next long-term plan to get started with. Like, if we want to truly progress quickly towards that 2040 target, which we know is necessary when we see the climate crisis in our midst now, that's really important. As Asha talked to, I think in terms of the platform that this gives to elevate our climate emergency declarations to be reflected in the way that we finance initiatives is really crucial, because it gives it that kind of dedicated space and gives it its own voice, so to speak, within the rating system, which I think is really important. And our young people are often the most vocal advocates for climate action. And as Evie mentioned, she gave voice to this earlier on this afternoon. I think it's our duty to listen to them and to act responsibly for the future that they want. And I hear the Mayor's point around the fact that 57.3% of respondents did not support the introduction of this targeted rate, but 42.7% did. I know that's a majority of people who didn't, but actually a large portion of our community does support this initiative. And the fact that Low Carbon Kapiti, a voice of expertise and a voice of people who understand the science and the realities of the climate crisis, are fully backing this, I think that speaks for something. We heard from 225 people in response to this question, and I doubt many of those people were young people. And so again, which voices are we not hearing from? It goes back to the conversation we were having on the last motion. Sometimes we have to be the ones who speak for those voices that we're not hearing from. So important to remember that the submission process is not equivalent to a referendum, and I think our decision-making process and the way in which we feed into this conversation must go beyond popular opinion to again take into account expert advice, long-term benefits, and our strategic priorities. Place and climate action is in our top area of strategic importance to us as a council, which we set together. And again, if we're not willing to vote down this recommendation and instead support a climate rate, I would ask ourselves what that actually means and how we're reflecting that within the way we do business as a council. So clarifying a point around financial implications of this rate. This year it would not increase the rates take, but is simply just siphoning off a portion of money that's already spent in climate mitigation. And I think it represents a forward-thinking strategic approach to ensure our community is resilient and proactive in the face of climate change. We honour our commitment to our climate emergency, and we lay the groundwork for other councils to come in and take this issue seriously as well, and to consider it within the way that they collect rates to then do the work on behalf of our community. So I would implore you all to vote the recommendation on the table down, and that we seek to introduce a climate action rate.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Well, I was against the wording of this when we were first discussing it, and my reasoning for my opinions been borne out with regard to this. This is not about climate, and this is a problem here. This is not about climate. This is about how we spend money that we're already spending and being transparent in how we spend it. It's that simple. We are modifying our rating structure to show that. To me, that's being sensible, because if we don't, there will be people out in the community that say we're hiding something, and this is not something we're hiding. We have declared it an emergency. I've been supportive of steps in this space, and following that kaupapa through, I have to support this. Sorry, I rephrase that. I don't support this for that reason. I will be supporting the recommendation that Sophie Handford, I know, is going to put forward, which is around putting this into our system. My apologies. So no, I won't be supporting this particular motion. I will be supporting a potential motion that was going to be put forward if this doesn't go through, because potentially this will, and that's my reasoning for that.
Right of reply.
Yes, thank you for the right of reply. Interesting, all the arguments for this targeted rate are actually speaking to the failure of a strategic comms plan around what the council does. Now, it's acknowledged the council does some wonderful work across multiple sectors, in terms of climate and mitigation and that the climate emergency. And so the arguments I've heard is around transparency and the public not knowing what we do. This, if we bring in if this is voted down and we bring in a climate rate, it's not a magic wand all of a sudden for the community to know what we're doing. It's just a targeted rate. And whilst it may not have an impact on this year's rates or next year's rates, it opens the door for substantial increases in the future on the community, which is already struggling with rates increase. And as we've seen with the regional rate for Wellington, New Zealand, once these rates are embedded, almost impossible for future councils or councils to wind back these rates. So I would say support the motion, don't bring in a targeted rate, and let's advocate to the council to have a strategic comms plan around letting our community know the good work that we do in this space, as opposed to thinking this is going to be a magic wand. what it will do, it will turn off a massive chunk of the community on the good work that we do. And I think there are a lot of people in the community who would see this as just another money grab, whether it is or not. So that would be my articulation, and support my motion. Not my motion, the motion. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I think we'll need a division. All in favour, raise your hands. The Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Spires, Councillor Cooper.
And, yep.
Put your hands up again.
So the 4, this is 4?
This is for the motion. This is for the motion. We've got Warwick, Kirby, Spires, Cooper, and me.
Right, and then against.
And then against, Hanford, Coford, Wilson, and Halliday.
So 4 wins, it's more 4.
Yeah, so that motion's carried. So we're moving on to F, adopts the draft rates remission policy with no changes. Anybody want to comment on this? Except that we want to publicise it more. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I did have a view, but when with the 17% proposed that was going to happen, that we'd heard that there were going to be quite a few people would be falling into gaps. So again, we're back in this situation where now I don't think there's a need to revise the policy. Who knows next week? So, no.
Okay,
I mean, the policy's fine.
you're
It's as a policy.
So you're
it's fine.
moving the recommendation as it stands?
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Warwick, any further debate? F, the rates remissions policy.
F off, Rob.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. So we've got G, adopts the draft revenue and financing policy with no changes.
Madam Chair, I can't support this motion. I have a change I'd like to make in the rates and remissions around the older person's housing, or a proposal I'd like to discuss. I guess this is why I flagged at the beginning of the meeting that there is things potentially in there that impact on the decisions here. So let that be as it is, but I would be proposing a different approach to the older person's housing rent increase. But the process here is as the process is, so I would be not supporting G at the moment.
Okay, well, do I have a mover for G? I'm happy to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder? The Deputy Mayor? This is adopting the draft revenue and financing policy with no changes. We've had quite a few months to have a look at this policy and suggest any changes. I'm happy to move it as it is today. Any further debate? Yeah, questions anytime. Yep.
So, so the question is to Martin's view. So, if this is adopted as is there any room for discussion around the rent for the older person's housing, or is that locked and loaded if we tick this box?
Mark?
That's just the question.
Thank you. The revenue and financing policy, if you adopt it as it is without changes, sets a range that the proposed change to the accommodation sits within. So the policy accommodates the change that you'll be discussing.
Further question then, does the range, with the policy, does the range allow that there wouldn't be an increase? That there is the range of increase sufficient that 0 is one of the numbers available?
Yes, it does. The range is set up the public-private split and it's up to 80%.
Yeah.
When we had the fees and charges discussion before this meeting, we were around a 78%. And I know there's some discussion before this meeting around the reduce the increase we're going to have, and it's roughly around a 72% now. So it's still within the range. So you still have a room to either increase further or reduce further.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In that case, 100% fine.
I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. We've got to vote to H, adopting the draft development contributions policy. Do I have a mover for that one? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Right of introduction, waived. Any debate? I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. So we might be able to take the next as a block, actually. We've got the development contributions, security mechanisms, significant engagement. So the next three, I, J, K. Does anybody want them to be taken separately, or are we happy to move those as a block? I, J, K, moved as a block by
Happy to
the
second, Madam
Deputy
Chair.
Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halliday. This is I, J and K. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? They're carried. L, continues to consider what more can be done to enhance democracy. We all love democracy. Do I have a mover for this?
Can I ask where that came from? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me whatsoever. I don't even know what it
It was one of the
means.
questions we asked in the consultation document. What do you think we can do to enhance democracy? So I guess what this motion is saying is that we'll look at the feedback and what people suggested, and we'll see what we might want to do. From this was a particular councillor who wanted this question to be asked in the consultation document, and it was originally kind of around meeting times. This was seen as a good time to have a meeting. I'm not sure. Anyway, continues. Do I have a mover? Are you moving this, Councillor Wilson?
No, the only reason
No?
I just in terms of clarification, it would assume that when you have a motion like that, it assumes that you're not doing that now. A motion is to develop something or promote something or change something. So who wants to put their hand up and say that council doesn't currently consider what more can be done?
It does have the word continue.
Yeah.
Continues to consider. I'm not dying in a ditch over it. I'm willing to move it. Does somebody want to second it? Yeah, Councillor Hanford seconded it. I don't think there's anything wrong with us continuing to consider what more can be done to enhance democracy. And we did ask the question in our consultation document, so it's good to have something about it. So, anyway, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. M, agrees to support Te Ara Korowai non-financially in seeking alternative funding. Is somebody willing to move this? Moved by Councillor Warwick, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Right of introduction.
I just don't think we've got the money to do it. That's pure and simple.
Anybody like to share their thoughts? Councillor Hanford, did you want to? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'll just repeat what I've said at earlier times. I think Te Ara Korowai are a very fundamental and very important service that they provide on the Kapiti Coast and have done for a long time. We just voted to increase our debt repayments by $221,000. And $86,000 a year would keep Te Aroa fully funded. I'm not sure that fully funding is an option. I think I'll quote Liz because she's not here. She can't repudiate what I'm about to say. But I think her argument was that there was a funding level pre-COVID, and so that operation stepped up during COVID, and so I think the number of around 30,000 would get them, it would fund them to that pre-COVID level. And so that's something that I would have been more than happy to support. And I'm not sure if you need an amendment or if you want to do that. I mean, if there's an appetite, I'll wait till what people got to say.
I'll just
Councillor Hanford?
Yeah, kia ora. I was thinking if this recommendation that's on the table fails, of putting a separate recommendation around funding them 30,000 per annum instead of the 86,000 that they've sought from us. Simply because I think, well, one, a really strong case was made about the importance and the value of the facility, and they're in a really tight spot now. So at least if we can provide them with a little bit of support and oomph to both go out and continue to seek funding, which they have been doing relentlessly. Definitely don't want this to be taken, the fact that they've needed to come to us as meaning that they haven't been doing that work themselves, because they really have. We also know that the demand for mental health services is
Okay, what I'm
increasing.
going to suggest you do
Yeah.
is move an amendment, because we still want to support them non-financially. We don't want to vote that down.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm suggesting that you move an amendment to tack on something to the end of that sentence to reflect what you're wanting to put to the table, and then you can continue as your right of introduction to the amendment.
Okay.
Does that
yeah,
sound good?
That sounds fine. So could be something like agrees to fund Te Ara Korowai with $30,000 per annum, and
Per-
also non-financially and seeking
So
alternative
per
funding.
annum, you're going to, so year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, every year.
3 years, for 3 years.
Okay, in years 1, 2 and 3
But
then
if
I'd
there's
suggest.
if the broad support from the table is just for 1 year, then I'm open to that as well. But just something to provide them with a slight bit of relief. So maybe we could, I don't know, we could test the 3 years, and then if that fails, we could go to 1.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, are you seconding that amendment? So it's in year 1, 2 and 3?
Yeah.
You can't move an amendment to the amendment. So it's up to you. You want to put up 3 years and try and fly with that, or you
Yeah,
want
we'll
to put up 1
put
year?
up 3 years.
Well, so I can move an amendment to the amendment. I would like to take 2 and 3 out of that amendment. Just let's do 1 year and see how they go. We can always pop some more on the next annual plan. It wouldn't trigger the significance policy. Do I have a seconder for that?
No,
You can't, because you moved the original motion. Councillor Spires is seconding the amendment which takes out 2 and 3. So we're voting now on taking out 2 and 3 from the motion. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Yes, you can ask a question. But I'm just in the middle of putting it to the vote, but here you go.
My question is that they came to us for 86,000 or whatever. So what guarantee do we have that if we give them 30, it's going to keep them going? And so are we investing well? On what information are we basing that amount? Because we haven't had that information.
So that's a legitimate concern, but not something I think we can answer today.
No, so just carry on.
Councillor Cooper?
Want to add a question or a statement?
Well, you can. We're debating.
Debating, okay, great, debate.
We're at the moment we're debating
Debating.
removing years 2 and 3. That's what we're debating right now. We've got
Okay,
an amendment to
yep.
an amendment,
Okay.
and this is about taking out years 2 and 3. Then we'll debate funding them in 1 year, and then if that fails, we'll go back to the substantive motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Years 2 and 3 out.
Yep.
Would be good.
Okay. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Against? So we're now. Oh, against. You against taking out 2 and 3? No, I'm not confused. I've got
No,
it.
yeah.
Okay, so now we're debating the substantive amendment, which is now funding $30,000 for 1 year. Any debate about that?
Yes. While I
Right.
can't answer Shelley's question definitively, what I can say, based on memory, and again, numbers, I struggle with numbers sometimes. What they did say is that they did have a pool of reserves. That it wasn't a substantial pool of reserves, but I get the impression that 30,000 would at least top that reserve pool to last them a year. After that, then they may have real serious issues, but at least it would get them another year.
Okay,
That's
so now we've got councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I'll just make the point, if we're going to donate $30,000 to mental health, we haven't had the discussion where that $30,000 is best spent, and it may not be with this organisation. It may be with another organisation that can do better work or different work or needs assessment. We haven't done the needs assessment. We're just funding these guys. But I'd also note that Gunboot Fridays has been given, I think, 26 million or thereabouts from central government. So there are, we keep stepping into central government's responsibility at the expense of our ratepayers? Because I'm assuming this $30,000 is coming straight out of OPEX and not CapEx. So, do we yet again go death by 1,000 cuts and add to our rates take? We sit around here and argue for 2 hours around percentages, and then we go and give money into areas where we haven't fully done the due diligence on it, because there may be better spends for our mental health dollar, and into areas that the central government is in. So that would be my debate.
Reply.
Yeah, but we didn't have the conversation.
So we're now debating the amendment that was moved by councillor Hanford, which I amended. So we're back to debating the amendment. David Cochrane.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't propose to say anything about the merits of this charity or the others that come down on the other lines, but just remind councillors who are voting and making the decisions that when you make a grant from ratepayer money, it's a very inefficient way of doing things, because the ratepayer has paid GST, so a $30,000 grant to any organisation is a $4,500 grant to the government in the GST that the ratepayer has paid. So for you to get $100 to give to somebody, you've got to charge me 115 and hand the other 15 onto the Crown. So maybe that's just something to keep in mind when you're discussing, do we help them, perhaps more for CAB than this one, do we help them with cash or do we help them with kind? I'll just remind you of that, that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
Being in this sector makes this conversation really hard, but my concern is similar to Councillor Cooper. Once we start down the slippery slope, where does it end? In terms of funding people, that's just my underlying thing around any of these. We have process within our organisation for people to apply for grants through other means. To do it through a long-term plan, I'm not sure is the best way to do this for these organisations. Doesn't mean we don't support them, doesn't mean we don't have heart and understanding of the challenges that our organisations face. But I look at someone like KYS, who we have a memorandum of understanding with, but we don't fund them through the long-term plan. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I don't think, while they were well mobilised in terms of putting submissions into this long-term plan process, there were a lot of them. I have very serious concerns about the precedent that we are setting through this.
Councillor Spires.
Thank you. I'm going to support this notice of motion from Councillor Hanford, because they do look after the most vulnerable, and it is just for 1 year, which will enable council to give them support to find other funding. And my understanding from our conversations before is our rate rise at the moment is only 11.81. So this might bring it up to the 12% that we passed. So, yeah, so I'm supporting it.
Yeah, we're on 1 year. We moved it. We voted to take out 2 and 3. Councillor Warwick? Did you have something else?
I'm with Lawrence on this because it is a slippery slope. I'm not saying they're not deserving and they're not a great organisation, but we are also not in the business of supporting those kind of services. We're offering them help by resource, staff, to try and get them funding. They do have some reserves. So I just, who's going to come next? There's so many good charitable organisations that do a whole lot of amazing work in our community, and we're just going to be looked at as a cash cow if we do this. And I just think we can't.
Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I agree 100% with Councillor Kirby as well, but for a slightly different reason. And that I agree that I don't think this should be in the LTP. I don't think this is part of an LTP thing at all. Having said that, of course I support it. I just don't think I think there was another mechanism that could have been used to have done that. And the problem is when you put these things into an LTP, they then get singled out. You then get the context of what they do. Sometimes get lost. I mean, you can question what they do and how effective are they and all that. And I'm not quite sure an LTP forum is really the right place for that. And so, obviously, I support their funding. But again, and this will come up with the next item as well with the CAB. And I don't think those sorts of items should be in an LTP. Anyway, at this stage, they are. So if we want to fund them, this is the only place to do it. So for now, but I would like to see another mechanism for these things to be put through, like a social sustainability fund, for instance. Anyway.
Yeah, so I was unsure whether I'd support this today. I wasn't going to, for the reasons that have been outlined in terms of slippery slopes and setting precedents and all that kind of stuff. But they have made the effort to come to us to talk to us about their needs. Anybody could have done that. And they are they're sitting in a bit of a difficult spot because we do have social investment funding, but we decided to do 3 years, and so there isn't an opportunity for that until the end of next year. So what this does is it takes them through until they've got the opportunity to apply through that process, which is why I moved the amendment not to have years 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Part of the reason anyway. So yeah, I'll support this. Councillor Hanford, write a reply.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I think through the conversation around recommendation B and rates funding or debt funding, the operating cost shortfall for Three Waters, we talked a lot about sort of people's struggles at the moment and just how tough it is out there for those on the ground in our community. And I think by at least giving Te Aroha a little bit of relief through hopefully a $30,000 injection of funds, that acknowledges the struggle that the most vulnerable people in our community are having to shoulder. So I think that goes kind of hand in hand to some extent with that conversation. And as Councillor Kirby mentioned, there was a lot of support through the long-term plan. They came and spoke, they mobilised their community and voices who probably we don't often hear from into these processes, into council processes, people who are struggling mentally, people who are potentially disabled, people who are disenfranchised in other ways. And so I think that needs to be acknowledged. Councillor Warwick mentioned that we might be, if we make this decision, looked at or perceived to be a cash cow. I think ultimately we'll just be perceived to be an organisation that cares about our community. This organisation needs some money. They're in a tough spot, and if we give them, again, a slight bit of relief, I think that we'll actually be, if we're worried about perception, we'll be perceived as an organisation that cares about, about the people who need us most. So I'm really keen to see support for $30,000 just for 1 year for Te Aroha, and also the continuation of that non-financial support as well as they seek alternative funding. So I'd encourage you all to support this alternative recommendation.
Yeah, so we're now going to vote on the amendment, which is to provide $30,000 in year 1 of the long-term plan. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? So, all in favour, raise your hands. Councillor, I've got to read them out too. The Mayor, Councillor Hanford, Councillor Spires, Councillor Coфord, Councillor Wilson. And against, raise your hands please. Councillor Kirby, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Cooper. Okay, so next we've got Kapiti Citizens Advice Bureau.
I'd like to, Madam
And
Chair,
the recommendation is to non-financially.
I'd like to
support
modify the
them?
recommendation if that's possible, Madam Chair.
Are you moving an alternative recommendation, did you say?
I am.
Okay, that'll save the messy amendment stuff, I guess.
The alternate recommendation to agrees to support Citizens Advice Bureau for 37,000 for the purpose of rent relief for year 1 of the long-term plan.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Warwick. Right of introduction.
This group's been through my committee twice. We asked them to come to the long-term plan process, and they did, and they made their request. I support, and the people at the Social Sustainability Committee, all the elected members supported that kaupapa. I was a bit disappointed to see it not follow through from the financial perspective, but here we are. I can see the pathway for me to ensure that they are at least funded for the next year. The Social Sustainability Fund will be available through review. I do not know whether this will or will not be a part of that. I also don't know whether there might be other options with regards to supporting them through finding new premises as well, and there may not be a requirement for the full $37,000 in that first financial year, because it'll still be tagged for rent relief and rent relief only from my perspective. And this can then be reviewed as part of the annual plan in 12 months' time. So I just ask the table to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'd speak in favour of it. That seems like a no-brainer to me. Hunter Donaldson came in a couple of times, spoke to us. Everybody will be aware of the enormous numbers of people that they assist, and the case has been made. If CAB wasn't there, council would probably be employing 2 or 3 people full-time to be filling in the gaps. In fact, we are one of the referring agencies to CAB. Quite frequently. So 37,000 is just, honestly, in terms of return on investment, this is absolutely, I wish we got the same return on investment for everything that we gave 37,000 to. So I was actually in favour of this being a 3-year thing, but again, I'm assured that 1 year will get it through to the kind of process that it should be in, rather than an LTP.
Any further debate? I'm tempted to just put this.
I just got a clarity question.
Okay, clarity question.
The motion is for 37,000, and all the documentation in previous discussions it was 35,000. Can I just get clarity around the figure, please?
I'm happy to align with the documentation.
Okay. So the mover has agreed to change it to the figure that's consistent with the long-term plan, which is helpful. Thanks, Councillor Kirby. Okay, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? So that's carried. Do either of you want a division? Okay. So next we've got the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra's music school fit out, and I would like to add the words for consideration during instead of to the at the end of the first line. I think that's particularly important as we might be under some pressure next year after some decisions we've made today.
Are you moving this? Because
Yeah.
I'm happy to move
I'll
it.
move it with the words "to the" and replace them with "for consideration during."
Second that.
Okay. It's a great project, but let's see how they go with their with the project in the next year. It might be that we're looking at year 3. We just don't know. Depends. They've got a long way to go with their fundraising.
Yeah, I would just note that when we had the Zoom call from Kerry Prendergast in relation to this, two things to note. One is that she's raised $30 million, which is just unbelievable. It's brilliant. And the other was that it wasn't urgent that we write a cheque. Yeah, so they've got $30 million to play with, but they do want this contribution, understandably. And she did say that it could go in year 2 or 3, and it would still meet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. So P defers the request to increase the operating grant to the Wellington Free Ambulance to the 25, 26, 27 annual plan. Who wants to move that? Councillor Cooper, seconded Councillor Kirby. Right of introduction, debate.
Yes.
Councillor Halliday.
Look, I just want to emphasise the importance of supporting this kaupapa. I'm quite happy for it to be deferred. We ring-fence funds in the Social Investment Fund for this. I'd like to see that just increase, but that's a conversation for the annual plan process or the review process around this. There was mention in the report that consideration should be given with regards to it only goes up to Peka Peka. The request would already considered that, so this is already factored into this request. And I just wanted to note that the 7,500 trips that the free ambulance did for our community at the Wellington Hospital, I think that's a very, very, very small price to pay for that. Happy to go with this as a recommendation, though.
Great. Any further debate? I think we all support this.
Yeah, just very quickly, and when we get these reports, I think wording's important for those who might not necessarily have previously understood the context. When it says noting that the WFA only services part of the Kapiti Coast, what it might have said is that it services the vast majority of the population of the Kapiti Coast. It really undersells it. It makes it sound like it's only a bit. It's not. It's the vast majority of the population. And Martin's pointed out the numbers. They're huge numbers. So this, I thought the report undersold the importance of what we do.
Okay, great. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Q. Kapiti Coast Trails Trust. We'll continue establishing it, but there's no further funding allocated to it at this time. Do I have a mover for that?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Move Councillor Halliday, seconded Councillor Spires. Right of introduction.
Waived.
Any debate? Put that to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Notes the proposed impacts of these recommendations on the average rates increase. So that's a noting recommendation. Moved by Councillor Kirby, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Right of introduction. Waived. Any debate? Put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. S. Including approved adjustments after public consultation considered of the submissions, Council approves a draft average rates increase of.
The number, well, it does. The table actually does reflect the changes to fees and charges. Yes, please. If we can throw it up.
Please do. So it's gone down and it's bounced back up a little bit again, hasn't it?
Can we? Okay.
11.88. Who would like to move that? Presuming Councillor Kirby would like to move that. Seconded by Councillor Halliday.
No, I just got a question, actually. We talked about the older persons housing.
Look, we can ask questions at any time. Can I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Cooper. Now ask your question.
Yep. So just wanted to check with regards to just getting that into discussion. We can discuss that later in the paper. That's not going to necessarily be problematic with regards to this percentage figure that we've now agreed on? Because that will change that figure slightly.
What will, sorry?
Well, I alluded to that, pointed out
Yep.
the housing for older persons. I'd be asking for a slight change there, which will impact on that figure. Small impact, but it will impact on that figure.
Yes.
But
Yes. So the 11.88 reflects the changes you made to Te Ara Korowai as well as to Citizens Advice Bureau. It does reflect what the reports outline to the
Correct.
hall hire charges plus the older person's housing accommodation.
The older person's housing.
If you're going to change that,
Yes.
it will change that number.
Correct.
Could
Yep.
you let us in on your big plan? Would
Oh, it's
that
not a
be
big
all
plan.
right?
There's no big plan here. I did refer to this at the beginning, that this would happen. So happy to speak to it now if you'd like, or I can speak to it when it turns up.
When's it coming up?
It's in the next report, fees and charges.
It's in the fees and charges. That's why I pointed out the 7.3. There were some things in there that impact on this decision at the beginning of the meeting.
That's right.
Yes.
Could I have some guidance about what I should do about this?
I was under the impression that we just clarified that within the parameters of being able to change this in part of the annual plan, that that's doable, as long as we stay within the parameters as such. Is that correct?
Yes.
This will fit within those parameters.
Just procedural. So
Oh,
this
sorry.
has been moved and seconded. Can I park it while we do the next report and then come back to it? Because otherwise we're going to move a figure that might be inaccurate.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So we'll just park this one for now.
Yep.
Let's polish off T so we don't forget to do that. Council will further consider and adopt the final audited long-term plan on the 27th of June. Can I have a mover? Councillor Kirby, seconded Councillor Cooper. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
That's carried. We'll come back to S, which has been moved by Councillor Kirby and Councillor Cooper. So we'll come back to it.
There is the additional recommendation U, which was about the rates for emissions.
We don't need it anymore. We're down to 11.88.
Did someone move? Sorry, for clarity, has S been moved?
So, yeah, U was that. Is it up there? We'll come back to you as well. Don't let me forget. So let's move on for now to the setting of fees and charges. Where are we? Got lost.
So we're moving reports. So the next report, 7.2, is the alcohol bylaw. Do you want to do that and then fees and charges?
Yep. No, we'll just go through it in order. Yep. So we are on to the proposed alcohol licensing fee bylaw. You probably don't need much more information about this. I think we've been round the houses with this one.
Yeah, it's just that,
I don't want an introduction to this report.
no.
We'll take it as read.
Yeah.
But be here, come up to answer any questions.
But we've got some ors in terms of recommendations, that's all.
Some whats?
There are some or in terms of the recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to it, I'm happy, I want to move it. Just saying.
I'm guessing you're going for C2. Would you be going for C2? Okay, do we have any questions about this or anything that's not in the report that needs to be communicated to councillors? Yep.
Taking it as read, but there were a slight few presentational changes we were looking to make, just based on some feedback, and that was just to the tables with the proposed fees in the back to actually have them annualised, provide a bit of a plain English definition that's in there, and also there was some text we provided in the bylaw itself to help provide some explanation to the regulatory processes that we're looking to actually just put into explanatory text, so not to confuse the bylaw.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we've got a recommendation in front of us, C2, which is we're leaving ourselves open to reviewing it to see if we can lift the 90% to 100%. For example, par example. That's been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Halliday. Okay, it was been seconded by Councillor Cooper. What's your question, Councillor Halliday? He wants clarity. Could you turn your free microphone, please, Councillor Wilson?
When we had the presentation from the gentleman down at the Paraparaumu Beach Bottle Store with regards to him falling out of category, I just wanted clarity. This is on page 18 and 19. Perhaps officers can help me out here. We've got the ability when we're processing these applications to drop people back one level. That's what's pointed out in 18 or 19, I think it is. So we can drop them back a level of, I think it was risk category. This is what captures the bottle store. So that would drop them, because they automatically fall in, I think, to the third category as such. So we do have discretion to drop that back at the time of application, one category, if you like, which puts him in a lower category, which I think he would be happy with. Is that your understanding of things, Nigel? Yep. I just wanted clarity on that, because that wasn't pointed out to me before as a process.
Yes, and Hamish is just pointing out to me that recommendation E refers to that point.
Yes, that's the one. And we'll get picked up in there, but that's generally what we're talking about to address that particular situation.
Yes.
Thank you.
So actually, I'm clarifying, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Cooper, you have moved A through E with option
Yes,
C2.
with C2.
Yep.
I can just speak to this quickly if you like, in terms of
Councillor Warwick, are
introduction.
you asking a question? Or? Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks. Right of introduction?
Yeah, so the feedback, originally this was going to be 80%, and the feedback was that we recover a greater amount in a quicker time, and it should be borne in mind that even 100% wouldn't actually be 100%, and that this hasn't happened for 12 years, so this is good. And I think the fact that it's being introduced over a period of time softens the blow, but it's and to Martin's point, in terms of those risk categories, there is a case-by-case basis, and there is an opportunity for people to actually either go up or down in that risk category, by the way. Yeah. So, happy to move it.
Sorry, who's answering your... Okay, he's finished. David Cochrane. Sorry, I'm just trying to do two things at once.
Thank you, Mayor. Is Chris Worth in the room?
Apologies, no, he's had to leave.
Because my concern is purely a legal one, that the draft bylaw that you're looking at under C is a nonsense. And in Part B, it talks about year 1, year 3, year 5. So you've got no fees in year 2 or year 4. You've got a default column that doesn't make sense. You need to substitute. Someone's done a cut and paste of the paper, which is fine as a council paper, but it's not any use as a bylaw. And so can you fix that?
Yeah, no, I think Hamish's comments at the beginning, perhaps slightly rushed. We wanted to acknowledge the comments that you had sent through, David, and just to note that we're updating the documents on the basis of your feedback.
Okay, good.
So we will be putting the annualised figures in there rather than what's there now. And I think you've made a couple of other points about some adjustments to the document. They will be made and we'll circulate them back round to everybody.
Great, thanks very much. I just wouldn't want you to see you adopt it.
Yeah.
Adopt this by mistake.
No,
and
that's
be
fine.
Stuck with a funny looking
Thank
line.
you.
My apologies for
That's
rushing
right.
things. I'm
Thanks.
trying to get through this agenda. Okay, so I'll put that to the vote.
Sorry, can I just a point of clarification on that? D allows for that.
Yeah. Put that to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Well done. End of a bit of a journey and sprinted to the finish line. We're moving on to fees and charges. Schedule of fees and charges on page 43 of agendas. Welcome Mark back to the table and the team.
All right. Welcome back, feedback. Fees and charges.
Okay. Can we have a bit of focus, please? We're just trying to get to the end of this hefty agenda. Mark. Fees and charges. Does anybody want to introduce this?
No. Through you, Worship. Take the report as read. It does link up to report 7.1, which we'll come back to. It is making some recommendations. Recommendations are on page 40 of the agenda. We'll take this report to read and go straight to questions.
Right. Martin, this is where you wanted to make your suggestion? Is
No, I'm happy to do that when we get to the recommendations. I've actually got a question that's separate from this. I thought we were asking questions. This
We're
hasn't been
asking
moved, has it?
questions about the recommendation. If you've got any suggestions or questions,
Okay,
just
all right.
go right ahead.
No, the only query I had was around the penalty fees for late payment of your dog fees, so quite substantial. I
Yeah.
didn't pick that up in the first one. Is that sort of standard industry practice with regards? It just seems quite high, that's all.
James, will answer that.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, it's an incentive for people to register the dog early, and they are consistently high and a little bit harsh across the district. But we always have the discretion to work with people. But we're trying to target those consistent non-registers. So yeah, they reflect probably cost and effort. Yeah.
That was it. I'm happy to talk to the change in recommendation I would like, if that's appropriate now.
Yep,
or would you
that would be
like to wait
great,
till other
Martin.
questions?
Thank you.
Hell, I'm sorry, all over the place at the moment. Look, it's in relation to the rent increase for our older persons housing. What I'm proposing is that we don't look at a 15% rate rent increase, we look at a 2.9% rate increase, which is in line with the CPI, whatever it is that we're using with regards to the measure for the general increases. My reasoning for that is 3 years ago we substantially increased the rent for our older persons housing, and then for the last 2 years we've actually increased the rent by the same measure. We've just agreed to transfer the older persons housing into a CHIP, whatever that might look like, and I'm not going to comment on that. I support that, but we have no idea what it's going to look like, but it is going to get transferred. These are our most vulnerable people. It's part of the network of our most vulnerable people in our community. I think a 2.9% rent increase, should we say in relation to the last 3 years, follows that pattern. So my recommendation would be to, instead of having a 15% rate increase, is what we were looking at reducing the rent increase from 30% to 15%, would be to reduce the rent increase from 30% to 2.9%. That would be what I'd be requesting.
Have we got the ability to crunch the figures around that? So this is the table that we looked at last week, am I right?
Yes.
In a briefing at length?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The table.
Is there any kind of support for this around the table before we, I just
Yes,
have an indication of whether we need to spend time on this or not?
Yeah, I want to support Councillor
Okay.
Halliday on this.
Okay, cool.
Happy to say why. If you want me to.
We'll do that when we debate it. We'd be busting the 20 ceiling by now.
We've got to fight the good fights. I just don't think it's fair. We've adjusted, we've increased, and we're increasing again, and it's compounding. Shit.
Are we getting things?
Well, it'll be nominal. we should still be under 12%, obviously. I'd be very surprised if it pushes us above 12%. They're just working it out.
$22 million. If Graham's quite happy to flog them off.
Even if you don't sell them at full market value.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do?
Well, if there was a mechanism by which the government would give an amount for a chip to buy them, great, it's fine.
Does the chip get access to cheap borrowing?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure they get access to cheap borrowing, but they certainly get access to funding that we don't get.
Right.
Yeah. So if say the commercial rent's $300, and under a chip they would be eligible for a $50 a week rebate.
Right.
We don't get that.
Yep.
And so, in that basis, they would be able to make the rents $350 and it's still $300
Yep.
to the resident. But the chip gets that and we wouldn't get it. So in order for us to get the same amount of money, we'd actually have to put it up by that amount, which is what's being proposed here. And it's a lost leader.
Yeah,
Totally. That's what we're flicking them. So what is it? I see red, I see red, I see red.
Okay, have we got that? Have we got some helpful figures there? Should we have a 5-minute breather while we
Yeah.
get this up on the screen?
The, do you know one of the unintended consequences of these kind of records, these rise, by the way, is with other social housing providers, because they kind of benchmark against each other. Because relative to them, well, if you want to keep wages low, that's why they reduce productivity. So instead of just pushing this up, pushing down in the north. Sorry.
Yeah. Is that the process that happens if you can't make it, or?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, good.
So, I'm happy to go with the tables for each one. That's my.
But that's just your perspective.
This is vote, where I would be a speaker.
Yep.
Then give us your.
Cool. I'm probably going to stay for this next bit, though. I'm just going to ring Dee now. Sorry, Dave. I should have gone the other way.
No, it's all right. I sucked in there. I can't hold it that long, though.